In the glittering world of New York's elite, where fortunes are forged in steel and secrets are buried in silk, one story shattered the illusion of perfection. It involves Jonathan Davenport, a self-made tech billionaire whose empire was as vast as his ambition. His pregnant wife, Olivia, was the picture of Grace, the woman who stood by him from the beginning. And then there was Chloe Preston, the brilliant, beautiful protégé with a diabolical plan to take it all. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's a tale of calculated deception, a brutal courtroom war over $1 billion legacy, and a final verdict that no one, not the lawyers, not the press, and certainly not the billionaire himself, ever saw coming. The truth that was revealed in that courtroom didn't just end a marriage. It unraveled an entire empire in the most spectacular way imaginable. The Davenport penthouse on Fifth Avenue was less a home and more a kingdom in the sky. It commanded a view of Central Park that poets would kill for its sprawling greenery, a living tapestry below. Inside, the air was a climate-controlled 72 degrees, scented with a bespoke blend of white tea and peony. Olivia Davenport, 7 months pregnant and luminous, stood before a floor-to-ceiling window, one hand resting protectively on the gentle curve of her belly. For a decade, she had been the anchor to her husband Jonathan's soaring rocket of a career. Jonathan Davenport wasn't born into this world. He had conquered it. The founder and CEO of Innovate Dynamics, a titan in the world of AI and logistics, he was the media's darling, a ruggedly handsome visionary who'd turned a garage startup into a global behemoth. He moved with an impatient energy as if the rest of the world operated in slow motion. Olivia, with her quiet intelligence and background in art history, was his perfect complement. She smoothed his rough edges, curated their life with impeccable taste, and provided the serene sanctuary he claimed he needed to return to after his corporate battles. Their life to the outside world was a flawless portrait of success. Dinners with senators, galas at the Met, summers at their sprawling Hamptons estate. But lately, the paint on that portrait had begun to crack. Jonathan was distant, his excuses for late nights at the office becoming more frequent and less imaginative. The easy laughter that once filled their cavernous home had been replaced by a tense silence, punctuated only by the chime of his phone, receiving yet another urgent work message. "Just closing the Phoenix deal," he'd murmur, kissing the top of her head without meeting her eyes. "It's a beast." Olivia wanted to believe him. She was carrying their first child, a son they had dreamed of for years. This should have been the happiest time of their lives, a time for them to draw closer. Instead, he was drifting away into an ocean of work she couldn't navigate. She blamed the stress of his company, the immense pressure he was under. It was easier than confronting the cold knot of fear tightening in her gut. The name Chloe Preston first entered their home as a whisper of professional admiration. "Chloe's a killer," Jonathan had said one evening, scrolling through a presentation on his tablet. "Came from our London office. Cambridge grad, sharp as a razor. She's single-handedly streamlining the European distribution network. A real asset." Olivia had smiled, offering a generic, "That's wonderful, dear." She'd pictured a stern, middle-aged woman in a sensible suit. She first met Chloe at the Innovate Dynamics annual charity gala. She was not stern or middle-aged. Chloe Preston was a vision in emerald green silk, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a smile that was both dazzling and predatory. She was perhaps 10 years younger than Olivia, radiating a focused ambition that felt like a physical force. She approached their table with a confidence that bordered on entitlement. "Mr. Davenport," she said, her voice a low, cultured purr. A wonderful event. And Mrs. Davenport, it is an absolute honor to finally meet you. Jonathan speaks of you constantly. The use of his first name was subtle, a tiny claim of intimacy. Olivia felt a prickle of unease. He's told me how indispensable you are to the company, Miss Preston. Please call me Chloe, she said, her eyes flicking from Olivia's face to her swollen belly and back again. There was a flicker of something in her gaze, not envy, but assessment, as if she were sizing up a competitor. Throughout the night, Olivia watched them. She saw the way Chloe's hand lingered on Jonathan's arm, a second too long, the way he leaned in to hear her speak, his body language more animated and engaged than it had been with Olivia in months. She saw the shared glances, the inside jokes that excluded everyone else around them. It wasn't just a boss and his protégé. It was something more, something dangerous. The drive home was quiet. Jonathan was buzzing, energized from the evening. Chloe really nailed the presentation to the board, didn't she? She's a star. Olivia stared out at the blurred city lights, her heart, a cold, heavy stone in her chest. She seems very familiar with you, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Jonathan finally seemed to notice her mood. A flicker of irritation crossed his face. What's that supposed to mean? Liv. She's my top executive. We work closely. That's it. Don't be ridiculous. Ridiculous. The word hung in the air between them, sharp and ugly. I'm 7 months pregnant with our son, Jonathan. I'm sitting at home every night while you're closing deals with her. Forgive me if I'm feeling a little insecure. He sighed, the classic patronizing sound of a man who had already decided he was in the right. You're hormonal. The pregnancy is making you paranoid. Chloe is an employee, a valuable one. End of story. He turned away, pulling out his phone, and the conversation was over. But for Olivia, it was just the beginning. The gilded cage she had so carefully decorated had suddenly become cold and claustrophobic. The man she loved was a stranger, and a wolf was at the door, smiling. The foundation of her world was trembling, and she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that a storm was coming to tear it all down. The signs, once whispers, grew into a deafening roar. A faint scent of a different perfume, something musky and expensive, not Olivia's light floral scent clinging to Jonathan's suit jacket. A credit card bill with a charge for a suite at the Carlisle Hotel, a place they hadn't stayed at together in years. Jonathan's explanation was flimsy dismissive. It was for a client meeting. Liv. For privacy. The gaslighting was a slow, insidious poison. Olivia found herself questioning her own sanity. Was she just being paranoid, as he said? Was the stress of the pregnancy clouding her judgment? She tried to push the doubts away, to focus on the baby, on the life they had built. But the evidence was relentless. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon. Jonathan was supposedly on a day trip to the Boston office. Olivia, needing a file from his home office for their accountant, went into the room he had recently started keeping locked. She found the spare key in its usual hiding spot, a hollowed-out book on their library shelf. His desk was immaculate as always. But on the leather blotter lay his personal tablet, which he had forgotten in his haste. It chimed with an incoming message. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She knew she shouldn't look. It was a violation of trust, a line she had never crossed. But what trust was left to violate? Her hands trembling, she picked it up. The screen was unlocked. The message was from CP. CP. The flight to Boston was a brilliant excuse. The view from this suite is almost as good as the view of you this morning. Miss you already. Don't forget to delete this. Beneath it was a photo. Chloe Preston wrapped in a hotel bathrobe, a champagne flute in her hand, grinning at the camera. The background was unmistakably the interior of a private jet, the Innovate Dynamics jet. The air left Olivia's lungs in a painful rush. It wasn't just an affair. It was a brazen, arrogant betrayal conducted on company time with company resources. They weren't even trying to hide it. They were mocking her. The Phoenix deal, the late nights, the client meetings, it was all a lie. A vast, intricate web of deceit spun by her husband and his star executive. She felt a wave of nausea so intense she had to grip the edge of the desk. The baby kicked a sudden, jarring movement, as if he too could sense his mother's distress. That small life inside her was a jolt of pure, cold clarity. This was no longer just about her and Jonathan. This was about her son. She would not bring him into a world built on lies. She would not be the quiet, humiliated wife who looked the other way. When Jonathan returned that evening, humming to himself as he loosened his tie, Olivia was waiting for him in the living room. The tablet was on the coffee table between them, screen dark. "Long day," he said, moving to kiss her. She turned her head, and his lips met the air. He frowned. "What's wrong?" "I think you know," she said, her voice shaking but firm. She gestured to the tablet. He saw it, and for a split second, a flicker of panic crossed his face before it was replaced by a mask of cold fury. "You went through my things. After everything I've given you, this life I've provided you, spy on me." The audacity of his response was breathtaking. "The life you've provided," she shot back, her voice rising. "The life where you lie to your pregnant wife's face and fly your mistress around on the company jet. That life," he didn't deny it. The fight she had expected, the pleas for forgiveness she had dreaded, never came. Instead, he sat down, the picture of detached calm. It was the same look he wore in a hostile board meeting. "All right," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "So you know. Let's be adults about this. Chloe and I have a connection. It's intense. It's not something I can just turn off." Olivia stared at him, dumbfounded. "Adults about this, Jonathan. I am carrying your child. We took vows. Does any of that mean anything to you?" "Of course it does." He said the words hollow. "But things change. People change. What I have with Chloe is different. It's intellectual. It's symbiotic. She understands the pressures I'm under in a way you can't." The insult was a physical blow. The years she had spent supporting him, hosting his clients, managing their life so he could build his empire, all of it dismissed. She was now the uncomprehending wife who just didn't get it. "So what happens now?" she asked, her voice a whisper. "Do you end it?" Jonathan looked away, out at the glittering skyline. "I don't think I can, and I don't think I want to." He finally met her gaze, and his eyes were cold, calculating. "Look, Liv, we have a child on the way. Nothing has to change, really. You'll be comfortable. The baby will have everything he could ever want. We just need a new arrangement. A more modern one." He was asking her to accept it, to step aside and allow this other woman to occupy a central place in his life, in their life. To become a fixture, a mother, but no longer a wife in any meaningful sense. He wasn't just confessing, he was dictating terms. The serpent was not just in their Eden, it was coiled on the throne, and her husband was handing it the crown. "No," she said, the word a rock in the torrent of his arrogance. "Absolutely not." A look of annoyance crossed his face. He was used to compliance. "Olivia, don't be naive. Think about what you'd be giving up. Think about the baby. A messy divorce will be a nightmare for everyone. Just be reasonable." "Reasonable?" She repeated, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "You have mistaken my love for weakness for the last time, Jonathan. Get out." He stared at her, genuinely surprised. "Get out? This is my home." "It is our home," she corrected, her voice gaining strength. "And you have defiled it. Get out, or I will call security and have you removed." For the first time, he looked uncertain. He had miscalculated. He had assumed she would crumble, that the money and the lifestyle would be enough to make her compliant. He saw a stranger standing before him, a woman he didn't recognize, forged in the fires of his betrayal. He stood up, grabbed his coat, and walked out the door without another word. The heavy silence that followed was the sound of a war beginning. The silence in the penthouse was a heavy, suffocating blanket. For 2 days, Olivia heard nothing. No calls, no texts, not even an email from his assistant. It was a classic Jonathan Davenport tactic. Ice them out. Let them panic, make them crawl back. But Olivia didn't panic. She ate, she slept. She spoke to the baby growing inside her, promising him a life of honesty and strength. She was grieving the death of her marriage, but with each passing hour, a cold, hard resolve was crystallizing in its place. The declaration of war arrived not via a phone call, but an email from a law firm she'd never heard of, Carter, Bellwether and Finch. The email was brief and brutal. It informed her that Mr. Davenport had retained their services, and that all future communication should be directed through them. It also contained a settlement offer. It was generous by any normal standard, but for the wife of a man whose net worth was estimated at over $6 billion, it was an insult. It was a go-away number. Attached to the offer was a stark reminder, the prenuptial agreement she had signed a week before their wedding 10 years ago. A document she had barely glanced at, so swept up was she in the romance and the assurances from Jonathan that it was just a formality for the board. The true assault came the next morning. Olivia was having breakfast when the building's head of security, a man who had always treated her with immense respect, called up to her apartment, his voice full of discomfort. "Mrs. Davenport, I'm very sorry to disturb you, but Mr. Davenport is here, and he has a guest. They're moving some things into the East Guest Wing." Olivia's blood ran cold. The East Guest Wing was a self-contained apartment within the penthouse with its own entrance. "Who is the guest, Robert?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "It's Miss Chloe Preston, ma'am." He had moved his mistress into their home, into the same apartment where her own mother stayed when she visited. It was a power play of breathtaking cruelty, designed to humiliate her, to break her spirit, to force her to take the insulting offer and run. He was telling her in the most public way possible that she was being replaced. That was it. The last thread of hope, the foolish, lingering thought that he might come to his senses, snapped. She calmly finished her tea, walked into her office, and Googled best divorce attorneys in New York. One name kept appearing at the top of every list, described as a lioness and a master strategist, Jessica Sloan. Jessica Sloan's office was the antithesis of the opulent, stuffy firms that represented men like Jonathan. It was modern, clean, and filled with light. Jessica herself was a woman in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing and an air of calm, focused intensity. She listened to Olivia's entire story without interruption, her expression unreadable. When Olivia finished, her voice raw with unshed tears as she described Chloe moving into her home. Jessica finally spoke. "He's not just ending a marriage, Mrs. Davenport," she said, her voice crisp and clear. "He's staging a coup. He wants to swap out the First Lady without disrupting the administration. It's the height of narcissistic arrogance, and frankly, it's sloppy." For the first time in days, Olivia felt a flicker of hope. "But the prenup, his lawyer says it's ironclad. It limits me to a one-time payment and 5 years of alimony. It specifically excludes any claim on Innovate Dynamics or his increased net worth." Jessica tapped a perfectly manicured nail on the thick document Olivia had brought with her. "Every ironclad agreement has a potential crack. Our job is to find it and drive a truck through it. In New York, prenups can be invalidated for a number of reasons. If it was signed under duress, if the financial disclosures were fraudulent, or if the terms are deemed unconscionable at the time of divorce." "It felt unconscionable," Olivia whispered. "He's worth billions, and he's treating me like a short-term employee he's laying off." "Exactly," Jessica said, a grim smile touching her lips. "That's our narrative. But we need more than a narrative. We need a weapon. Tell me about the day you signed this. Everything you can remember. The lawyers, the room, how you were feeling, what Jonathan said." Olivia closed her eyes, casting her mind back a decade. It was a whirlwind week before the wedding. She remembered being rushed into a conference room at Jonathan's old law firm. His lawyer, a gruff older man named Mr. Peterson, was there. She had her own lawyer, a young man recommended by Peterson, a clear conflict of interest Jessica immediately noted. "Jonathan told me it was just to protect his existing assets, the company he had already started," Olivia recalled. "He said it was standard practice. I trusted him." "And you were in love with him," Jessica added softly. "That's the oldest trick in the book, weaponizing love to get a signature. Let's look at the financial disclosures attached to this. Did you have your own accountants review these figures?" "No," Olivia admitted, feeling a flush of shame. "I just glanced at them." Jessica's eyes lit up. "Good. That's a potential opening. We'll subpoena a decade of his financial records. We'll do a full forensic accounting. If we can prove he significantly undervalued his assets or failed to disclose potential future earnings from deals already in the works at the time you signed, we can argue fraudulent inducement." The strategy was beginning to form. This wouldn't be a simple divorce. It would be an archaeological dig into Jonathan Davenport's financial and personal history. That evening, Olivia packed a suitcase. She would not stay under the same roof as that woman. She called her oldest friend, Sophia, who lived in a beautiful brownstone in the West Village. "Soph, can I come stay?" "It's over." Her voice finally broke. "My door is always open," Sophia said. No questions asked. "Come home." As Olivia walked out of the penthouse for the last time, the sound of laughter echoed from the east wing, a woman's high-pitched, triumphant laugh. Chloe's laugh. It didn't break Olivia. It hardened her. She got into the elevator, her hand on her belly, and didn't look back. The battle lines had been drawn. This was no longer about a broken heart. It was about justice for herself and her unborn son. Jonathan and Chloe thought they had already won. They had no idea who they were truly fighting. The opening salvos were fought through legal motions and discovery requests. Jonathan's lawyer, a notoriously aggressive litigator named Benjamin Carter, played hardball from the start. He filed a motion to enforce the prenuptial agreement, immediately painting Olivia in the press through strategic anonymous leaks as a spurned, greedy wife trying to cash in on a man's genius. The tabloids ran with it, publishing pictures of a smiling Jonathan and a chic Chloe at a restaurant juxtaposed with a grainy, unflattering photo of a heavily pregnant Olivia leaving Jessica Sloane's office. The narrative was clear: the vibrant future versus the burdensome past. Chloe, meanwhile, was brazen. She was a ghost on social media, but she was a very visible presence in Jonathan's life. She was photographed leaving the Fifth Avenue penthouse in the morning, getting into Jonathan's chauffeured car. She hosted a small exclusive dinner party for tech investors in the very dining room Olivia had spent months decorating. Every move was calculated to project an image of seamless transition. She wasn't a mistress. She was the new CEO of Jonathan Davenport's life. "She's not just taking over your home. She's trying to erase you," Jessica said during one of their strategy sessions, her office now a war room plastered with financial charts and timelines. "It's psychological warfare. Don't engage. Don't read the articles. Let them think they're winning. We fight this war in the trenches of financial discovery, not on page 6. The discovery process was a brutal, slow-motion battle. Carter's team was masters of delay and obfuscation. They delivered truckloads of documents, thousands upon thousands of pages of irrelevant paperwork, designed to bury the few nuggets of gold they were legally required to produce. They claimed key documents were protected by attorney-client privilege or corporate confidentiality. But Jessica's team was relentless. They hired a team of forensic accountants led by a man named David Chen, who had a reputation for being able to find a single falsified number in a mountain of data. For weeks they worked around the clock, fueled by coffee and a shared sense of outrage. "We need a smoking gun," Jessica insisted. "Something that proves he willfully and knowingly deceived you about his financial state when you signed that prenup." While the accountants dug, Jessica focused on deposing everyone involved in the prenup's creation. Jonathan's deposition was a masterclass in controlled arrogance. He answered every question with carefully rehearsed, legally sanitized responses. Yes, he had disclosed his assets. No, he did not pressure Olivia. Yes, she had her own legal counsel. He was calm, collected, and utterly infuriating. Chloe's deposition was even more polished. She presented herself as a dedicated professional who had fallen in love with her boss, a victim of circumstance. She claimed to know nothing about Jonathan's finances. "My relationship with Jonathan is about a meeting of minds, not balance sheets," she said, her voice dripping with faux sincerity. The breakthrough came from an unexpected quarter. Olivia, unable to sleep one night, was going through old boxes of memorabilia from the early days of her relationship with Jonathan. Tucked away in a photo album was a brochure for a villa in Lake Como, Italy. She remembered their trip there just a month before the wedding. Jonathan had been on the phone constantly speaking in excited, hushed tones about a deal he was working on. He had called it Project Chimera. "He told me it was a long shot," Olivia recalled to Jessica the next day. "Some kind of new routing algorithm that he said could revolutionize the shipping industry. He said it was years away from being viable." Jessica's eyes narrowed. Was Project Chimera mentioned anywhere in the financial disclosures for the prenup? "I don't think so," Olivia said. "I think it was just listed as speculative R&D valued at basically zero." Jessica slammed her hand on the table. "That's it! That's our gun!" She immediately had her team scour the thousands of pages of documents from Innovate Dynamics for any mention of Project Chimera. They found it buried deep in R&D budgets from 10 years ago. As Olivia had said, it was valued at next to nothing. Then David Chen, the forensic accountant, found something else. In the weeks leading up to the prenup signing, Jonathan had used a shell corporation, one not listed in his financial disclosures, to purchase 2 smaller tech companies that held key patents. Separately, these patents were minor. Together, they were the missing piece that made Project Chimera not just viable, but revolutionary. And the final piece of the puzzle, a series of emails between Jonathan and his patent attorney, dated 2 weeks before the wedding, discussing a multi-billion-dollar offer from a logistics giant, a company called Global Freight, to license the Chimera technology. Jonathan had turned down the offer, opting to develop it in-house. He hadn't just undervalued an asset. He had actively concealed a multi-billion-dollar licensing offer for a technology he presented to Olivia as a worthless long shot. He had fraudulently misrepresented the value of Innovate Dynamics by an order of magnitude. "This is not just a crack in the armor, Olivia," Jessica said, her voice trembling with excitement as she laid the emails out on the conference table. "This is a tactical nuke. The prenup is dead, and Benjamin Carter knows it." When Jessica presented this evidence to Jonathan's legal team, the tenor of the negotiations changed instantly. The arrogance vanished, replaced by a tense, frantic energy. Carter's new settlement offer was 10 times the original amount. "Don't take it," Jessica advised. "He's still lowballing you. He's terrified of what else we might find, and he's desperate to avoid having this play out in open court. We're not just fighting for a settlement anymore. We're fighting for a public judgment that validates the truth." Olivia thought of Chloe laughing in her home. She thought of Jonathan's cold, dismissive eyes. She thought of her son, who deserved a mother who fought for what was right. "No deal," Olivia said, her voice clear and strong. "I'll see him in court." The legal battlefield was about to become a public arena, and Olivia was no longer the defendant. She was on the attack. The decision to go to trial sent shockwaves through their social and financial circles. A Davenport divorce trial was guaranteed to be a media circus. Benjamin Carter, realizing his motion to enforce the prenup was now dead on arrival, shifted tactics. His new strategy was to paint Jonathan as the victim of a brilliant but emotionally unstable gold digger. He would argue that Olivia was a vindictive woman, using the Project Chimera discovery as a pretext to extort an unreasonable sum from the man who had given her everything. Chloe, under the careful coaching of Carter's team, began playing her part to perfection. She gave a tearful, exclusive interview to a major news outlet, never mentioning Olivia by name, but speaking of the profound intellectual and emotional connection she shared with Jonathan and the unfortunate and aggressive situation that had unfolded. She was the calm, intelligent center of the storm, while Olivia was portrayed as the tempest. The pressure on Olivia was immense. Paparazzi followed her every move. Anonymous sources fed stories to the press about her lavish spending and erratic behavior. It was a smear campaign of the highest order, designed to break her before she ever set foot in the courtroom. "They want you to fold," Jessica said, her voice a steadying presence. "Every article, every paparazzi photo is a move on the chessboard. Ignore the noise. We focus on the board." While preparing for the trial, Jessica's team continued their deep dive into Innovate Dynamics. They were granted court-ordered access to the company's internal servers. A young, fiercely loyal paralegal on Jessica's team, named Maria Flores, was tasked with the mind-numbing job of sifting through a decade of inter-office communications. For weeks, Maria found nothing but corporate jargon and project updates. Then late one night, fueled by her third espresso, she stumbled upon an oddity. She was looking at Chloe Preston's personnel file and her transfer from the London office. The transfer had been personally fast-tracked by Jonathan, which was unusual for an executive at her level. But what was truly strange were the security protocols surrounding her. Her access to company servers was far broader than her job title as head of European logistics would suggest. She had top-tier C-suite level access to R&D finance and M&A, including the Project Chimera files. Why would a logistics expert need access to early-stage AI research? Maria muttered to herself. She started cross-referencing Chloe's server access logs with dates of key corporate events. A pattern began to emerge. The night before Innovate Dynamics announced a major acquisition, Chloe had accessed the M&A deal room files. A week before a quarterly earnings call that surprised Wall Street with lower-than-expected profits, she had downloaded the full unreleased financial report. This wasn't just a mistress using her position for influence. This was something else. This was methodical. Maria followed the thread. She investigated Chloe's background before she joined Innovate Dynamics. On paper, it was flawless. Cambridge, a brief but brilliant stint at a consulting firm in London. But Maria was persistent. She made calls to contacts in the UK. She found that the consulting firm Chloe had supposedly worked for had gone out of business under mysterious circumstances, with rumors of corporate espionage swirling around its collapse. The unraveling thread led her to a name, Nexus Corp. Nexus Corp was Innovate Dynamics' chief rival, a ruthless, shadowy conglomerate known for its aggressive growth tactics. For years, Nexus had seemed to be one step ahead of Jonathan, anticipating his market moves and undercutting his deals. Jonathan had always chalked it up to a leak in his executive team, and he had fired several people in a furious but ultimately fruitless mole hunt. Maria's hands were shaking as she connected the dots. She started running digital forensics on Chloe's work computer files, which they had received as part of Discovery. Buried in a hidden encrypted partition, she found it fragments of deleted emails. Communications sent not through the Innovate Dynamics server, but a private encrypted server. The recipient was a senior vice president at Nexus Corp. The emails contained proprietary data strategic plans and sensitive R&D information stolen from Innovate Dynamics. Chloe Preston was not a star executive who had fallen for her boss. She was a corporate spy. Her affair with Jonathan wasn't a crime of passion. It was a tactic of war. She hadn't seduced him for his money or his status. She had seduced him for access. Her plan to replace Olivia was not just about becoming Mrs. Davenport. It was about getting control from the inside to gain access to the deepest levels of Jonathan's life and company, to a point where she could either bleed it dry for Nexus Corp or help orchestrate a hostile takeover. She hadn't just played Jonathan. She had played everyone. When Maria presented her findings to Jessica and Olivia, the room fell silent. The sheer scale of the deception was almost incomprehensible. This had never been a simple divorce case. They had stumbled into a massive corporate espionage scheme. "My God," Olivia whispered, looking at the evidence. He had no idea. He thought she was his brilliant protégé, the only one who understood him. Jessica's mind was racing, processing the implications. This changed everything. It transformed their civil case into something far more explosive. "We have to be careful," Jessica said, her voice low and strategic. "This is dynamite. If we introduce this in the divorce proceedings, Carter will scream that it's irrelevant, a desperate attempt to slander his client and poison the judge. The judge might even agree and refuse to admit it." "So what do we do?" Olivia asked. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Jessica's face. "We don't introduce it. Not at first. We let them build their case. We let them put Chloe on the stand to testify about her deep, meaningful love for Jonathan. We let them build her up as the intellectual soulmate. And then on cross-examination, I will tear her apart thread by unraveling thread." We won't just win this case, Olivia. We're going to detonate their entire world in a public courtroom. The first day of the trial was a media frenzy. The Manhattan courtroom was packed with journalists, legal analysts, and the morbidly curious. Jonathan Davenport sat at the defendant's table, looking every inch the powerful CEO, his jaw set, his eyes fixed forward. Beside him, Benjamin Carter radiated an aura of expensive, predatory confidence. Across the aisle, Olivia sat with a quiet dignity that seemed to unnerve her opposition. She was visibly pregnant, her hand often resting on her belly, a silent testament to what was at stake. Carter's opening statement was a masterwork of character assassination, disguised as legal argument. He painted a picture of Jonathan as a hard-working visionary, betrayed by a wife who, after years of enjoying a life of unimaginable luxury, saw the end of the marriage as her final biggest payday. He framed the Project Chimera issue as a minor good-faith omission of a speculative project blown out of proportion by Olivia's scorched-earth legal team. When it was Jessica Sloane's turn, she was calm and methodical. She didn't raise her voice. She simply told a story. The story of a partnership, of a woman who supported her husband, who built a life with him, who was preparing to bring their child into the world, only to be systematically and cruelly discarded. This case, she concluded, looking directly at the judge, is not about greed. It is about the profound and calculated deception that occurred not only at the end of this marriage, but at its very beginning. The first few days were a blur of financial experts and witnesses arguing over valuations and disclosure requirements. Jessica's team expertly laid out the evidence of the Project Chimera deception, proving that Jonathan had knowingly and willfully hidden a potential billion-dollar asset. The tide of opinion in the courtroom began to shift. Jonathan's veneer of invincibility was cracking. The moment everyone was waiting for came midway through the second week. Benjamin Carter called Chloe Preston to the stand. She was the picture of poise and sophistication in a tailored navy blue dress. She spoke eloquently about her admiration for Jonathan's intellect, their shared passion for innovation, and how their professional relationship had to. Her surprise blossomed into something deeper. She was sympathetic, believable, and utterly convincing. She spoke of her heartbreak over the unfortunate situation and her desire for a peaceful resolution for everyone's sake, especially the child's. On direct examination by Carter, she was a star witness. She looked at Jonathan with adoration. She spoke of Olivia with practiced pity. Carter had her testify that she knew nothing of Jonathan's business dealings with his wife and that their relationship was entirely separate from his legal troubles. Then it was Jessica's turn to cross-examine. The energy in the courtroom shifted. Everyone leaned forward. Jessica approached the witness stand slowly. She started with simple, innocuous questions. Ms. Preston, you were the head of European logistics for Innovate Dynamics. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. A demanding job, I'm sure. Long hours. Very. I'm deeply committed to my work. Your work then was primarily focused on supply chains, shipping routes, and warehouse management in the European sector. Broadly speaking, yes. Jessica paused, picking up a file. Then perhaps you can explain to the court why on March 12th of last year you accessed the Level 7 R&D server for Project Chimera, a project based entirely in Palo Alto, with no European logistics component at the time. A flicker of surprise in Chloe's eyes. Carter shifted in his seat. Objection, Your Honor. Relevance. I am establishing a pattern of behavior, Your Honor. It speaks directly to the witness's credibility and her true role within the company and in Mr. Davenport's life, Jessica countered. I'll allow it for now. But get to the point, Ms. Sloane, the judge said. Chloe recovered quickly. As a senior executive, I believe in having a holistic understanding of the company's entire portfolio. A holistic understanding, Jessica repeated, letting the words hang in the air. Is that why you also accessed the confidential files for the Sunstream acquisition 2 days before it was announced? Was that also for a holistic understanding? Chloe's smile tightened. I am often consulted on a wide range of strategic initiatives. Were you consulted when you downloaded the company's unreleased Q3 earnings report and its confidential 5-year strategic plan to an external encrypted hard drive on the evening of September 8th? Jessica's voice was like ice. Panic began to dawn on Chloe's face. She looked toward Carter, who stood up again. Objection! This is a fishing expedition. Ms. Sloane is badgering the witness with baseless accusations. Baseless. Jessica turned to the judge. Your Honor, we have server logs authenticated by third-party experts documenting every one of these data transfers. This isn't a fishing expedition. I've already caught the fish. I'm simply showing it to the court. The judge looked at Chloe, then at Jessica's file. Objection overruled. Answer the question, Ms. Preston. Chloe stammered, I don't recall the specific details of every file I handle. Jessica moved closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that everyone in the silent courtroom could hear. Perhaps you'd recall this then. An encrypted email account, cpservices@protonmail.net. Does that ring a bell? Ms. Preston. Chloe went pale. Jonathan was now staring at her, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. An account from which you sent weekly updates on Innovate Dynamics' proprietary research business, strategies, and private negotiations. Updates sent to a Mr. Alistair Finch, the Executive Vice President of Corporate Strategy at Nexus Corp. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. The journalists were scribbling furiously. Jonathan Davenport looked as if he had been physically struck. He turned and stared at Chloe, not with anger, but with the sickening look of a man realizing his entire reality was a lie. This is an outrage, Carter boomed, but there was desperation in his voice. My client is not on trial for corporate espionage. No, Jessica thundered, her voice filling the room. She is not. But her credibility is. You put her on this stand as Jonathan Davenport's intellectual soulmate, a woman who fell in love with him. I am proving to this court that she is a liar and a corporate spy who seduced him not for love, but for access. Her entire relationship with him was a fraud, a tool to help his biggest rival gut his company. This goes to the very heart of the deception that has defined this entire case. Chloe was crumbling on the stand, her polished facade shattered, revealing the cold, terrified fraud beneath. Jessica turned to look at Jonathan Davenport. His empire, his carefully constructed life, the woman he had destroyed his family. For all of it was dissolving before his very eyes in the middle of a divorce hearing he had started. The courtroom drama was no longer about a prenup. It was about the spectacular implosion of a billionaire. The rest of Chloe Preston's cross-examination was a massacre. Faced with printed copies of her encrypted emails to Nexus Corp, she fell apart, completely invoking her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination to nearly every question. Benjamin Carter's attempts to salvage the situation were futile. His star witness had been exposed not as a loving partner, but as a hostile corporate agent. The damage was catastrophic and irreversible. When the proceedings resumed, the atmosphere was funereal. Jonathan Davenport looked like a ghost. He wasn't just losing a court case. He was witnessing the public autopsy of his own judgment. The woman he had lauded as his intellectual equal had played him for the biggest fool in the tech world. His affair wasn't a romance. It was a security breach. The trial concluded swiftly after that. Carter's final arguments were weak and perfunctory. How could he argue for Jonathan's credibility when his client had been so monumentally duped? Jessica Sloane's closing statement, however, was a quiet masterpiece. She didn't gloat. She simply restated the facts. From the very beginning, she said, her voice resonating with calm authority, this case has been about a web of lies. A lie told to a trusting fiancé about a prenuptial agreement designed to impoverish her. A lie told to a pregnant wife about late nights at the office. And as this court has now seen, it was all underpinned by a much larger, more sinister lie. A lie that Jonathan Davenport himself fell for. Olivia Davenport is here today, not as an aggressor, but as the one person in this sordid tale who consistently acted with integrity. We ask the court to not only invalidate the fraudulent prenup, but to recognize the full scope of the partnership she contributed to this marriage and award her the fair and equitable justice she deserves. The judge, a stern but fair woman named Judge Maria Chen, took 2 days to deliberate. When she reconvened the court, the room was silent enough to hear a pin drop. On the matter of the prenuptial agreement signed on June 10, 2015. Judge Chen began her voice, leaving no room for doubt. It is the finding of this court that Mr. Davenport knowingly and willfully misrepresented his financial standing and the value of Innovate Dynamics by failing to disclose material information regarding the Project Chimera technology. The agreement was procured through fraudulent inducement. Therefore, the prenuptial agreement is hereby declared void and invalid in its entirety. A wave of murmurs swept the room. Olivia let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for a year. Jessica gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. But the judge wasn't finished. This was the verdict everyone expected. The stunner was yet to come. Under New York marital law, Judge Chen continued, all assets acquired during the marriage are subject to equitable distribution. This includes the appreciation in value of Mr. Davenport's company, Innovate Dynamics, over the 10-year period of the marriage. She paused, looking directly at Jonathan. However, this court has also been presented with compelling, if circumstantial within this specific civil case, evidence of extreme malfeasance that directly impacts the valuation of said company. The actions of Ms. Preston, facilitated by Mr. Davenport's negligence and poor judgment, have exposed Innovate Dynamics to significant harm, potential shareholder lawsuits and federal investigation. She let that sink in. Therefore, the distribution will be as follows. Judge Chen announced, her voice ringing with finality. The marital assets will be divided. Olivia Davenport is awarded 50%. 50% of all real estate stock portfolios and art collections. Furthermore, she is awarded a 40% stake in Jonathan Davenport's personal shares of Innovate Dynamics. 40%. Not of the company, but of his controlling stake. It was a number so vast, so stunningly high, that for a moment no one reacted. It was a figure that would not just make Olivia a billionaire in her own right, but would make her one of the single largest shareholders in the company. It fundamentally altered the power structure of a global corporation. Benjamin Carter was on his feet, sputtering, "Your Honor, that is a punitive and unprecedented award. We will appeal." Judge Chen fixed him with an icy stare. "Sit down, Mr. Carter. It is not punitive. It is equitable. Mr. Davenport's reckless personal behavior directly and catastrophically endangered the primary marital asset. Mrs. Davenport, through her counsel's diligence, is the one who uncovered this corporate cancer. One could argue that by exposing Ms. Preston, she has saved the company from far greater damage. Her 40% stake reflects not only her contribution to the marriage, but her role in preserving the very asset we are here to divide. This verdict is final. Jonathan Davenport simply sat there, his face ashen. He had lost half his liquid fortune and a huge portion of his company. But he had lost more than that. In the space of a week, he had lost his wife, his mistress, his reputation, and his unquestioned control over the empire he had built. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The moment the verdict was read, news alerts fired off across the world. Innovate Dynamics stock plummeted in after-hours trading. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. Federal investigators from the SEC and the FBI swarmed the company's headquarters, launching a full-scale investigation into the corporate espionage claims. Chloe Preston was arrested by federal agents at her hotel later that day. Olivia left the courthouse without speaking to the press, a quiet figure moving through a storm of flashing cameras. She wasn't celebrating. There was no joy in this victory, only a profound, weary sense of vindication. 2 weeks later, Olivia gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Nicholas. As she held him in her arms in the quiet of the hospital room, looking down at his tiny, perfect face, she knew that the fight had been worth it. She had not just secured their future. She had reclaimed her own story. Jonathan Davenport was forced to step down as CEO of Innovate Dynamics. He became a recluse, his name synonymous with one of the most spectacular self-immolations in corporate history. Olivia, now a major power player at the company she had helped save, did not take a vindictive role. She used her position on the board to install a new ethical leadership team. She used her fortune to establish the Sloan Davenport Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to providing top-tier legal representation for women facing powerful, abusive partners in the justice system. She had walked into that courtroom a pregnant, discarded wife. She walked out a titan, a symbol of quiet strength and resilience. She had been pushed to the edge, but instead of falling, she had learned how to fly. Her son would grow up knowing not the story of a victim, but the legacy of a victor. Olivia Davenport's story is a powerful reminder that the truth is the most potent weapon of all. In a world that so often tries to silence and marginalize women, she fought back not with anger, but with intelligence, courage, and an unbreakable will. Her journey through the darkness of betrayal led to an outcome no one could have predicted, proving that justice, though sometimes slow and arduous, can prevail in the most stunning fashion. It shows that integrity is not a weakness, and that the quietest person in the room can sometimes have the strongest voice. If this story of resilience, strategy, and ultimate vindication moved you, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear a story of strength today. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell. We are dedicated to bringing you more compelling stories of real-life drama, where the truth is always more shocking than fiction. Thank you for listening.